This week on Pivot with Purpose.
Yeah,
this is really happening. And this
really
is all out there.
This is all out there.
And why don't we? Here's my thing. Every time I talk to you, it's like I'm tuned in because first you tell a story like a movie.
Right.
But also, why aren't our news outlets explaining this to us like this and painting these pictures for us of what's really going on?
Because there's a big problem. And the big problem is clicks versus substantive content.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Pivot with Purpose. Y'all, I am literally coming off of 3 days of being on set. Total 16 episodes, but for myself, 10 were talent. And I haven't talked that much in a really long time. So I knew that I was coming back home last night around midnight. I got home and I knew today I had to be back in the studio to record 2 more episodes. But I was actually excited to come in because I had a pretty cool guest that if you've been an OG listener back to the Shit I'm 30 Days when I just asked him, it was recording in my house with probably no video. I don't think there was video.
No video.
It was audio only, and that episode did really well.
Outstanding.
James Smith, attorney. How do you call an attorney? You're like a doctor. It's like Dr. whatever.
So, we actually are doctors. A lot of people call us Esquire because the degree we get is a Juris Doctor. So some people call us doctor, but most people just call us lawyer, attorney.
Attorney James Smith.
Absolutely. But I'm about to tell you something. You are such a special person. I'm going to give you the privilege of calling my nickname.
What's your nickname?
Trey.
Oh, I know.
That's right.
But is that your son's name as well?
So my son's name is Jordan.
Jordan.
That's right.
So whenever I saw Trey, you know what? I would hear you say Jordan, but I thought you called your son Trey.
Yeah,
I always thought that you would just have your Instagram as Trey for your son.
Yep. No, that's me. That's me because I'm James W. Smith III. And
so where did Trey come from?
Well, because of the third. So the nurse that helped deliver me told my mother, hey, you've got a third there. You should call him Trey. And it helped avoid confusion because my father's name was James. So sometimes, my mother would say James, we'd both go, huh?
Everybody looks.
And so I've just been going by Trey. So while the professional legal name is James, someone cool like you and all my family and friends call me Trey.
I got Trey. Y'all can't say that though. Another thing that I'm able to do with my dog Trey is when I have to call him a straight attorney James Smith. I am always in some shit. In the past, I don't know. I don't know how long ago I met you now, but it's at least 8 years.
Yeah. I want to say it was back 2015, maybe.
Yeah. I've had a couple legal woes, not that bad, kind of, sort of. Always something coming up, but I know that my go-to, I don't even know what kind of. I do know you're a criminal, but I don't think about what you're an attorney. What's it called?
Specialty.
The specialty. I just call you. And from there, I'm like, he's going to know somebody. I just feel like you will already know what to do, but then find me someone that you already know. The latest one was with the whole legal spat with Ayana, which I talked about publicly. But I remember being so scared. I called first Andrew, between you and another friend attorney, Andrew. And he's business. You're a criminal. And I'm calling about family stuff. And you're like, it's more understanding the lingo. When you first get something in legal paperwork,
right?
Why is it not English?
Well, here's the reality, and I'm going to reveal some of the secrets of the profession. Law is a guild, okay? And the reality is most people with just a little bit of training could do what we do. I know I'm giving away the profession secrets here, but that's the reality.
No one's going to school for that long.
Exactly. And so as a way of making us very valuable to people, we do what all guilds do. First, we use language that is not easily understandable to the average person. So Latin, various phrases, things of that nature. If I could be king for a day in the legal world, I would get rid of all phraseology that's not plain English.
Plain English. Just give it to me straight.
Exactly.
And let me understand it. We can understand each other and communication could be so much better.
That's it.
The legal system would be so much better if it was English.
I think if we did a follow-up podcast 25 years from now, you're going to find that a few things have changed in the legal profession. Well, first, AI, I think, is going to change our profession radically. Right? It used to be that people needed us to interpret things, to understand things. I wouldn't doubt if maybe in the next 2 years or so, you'll have an AI app on your phone where you can scan a legal document and then suddenly someone will come up and explain it to you the same way the lawyer could.
Wow.
Legal consultation.
We have to have this already.
Yeah. It's coming. It is coming. Trust me. It is case.
So this is not even what we came here to talk, but it's actually kind of interesting. So what happens to you? How do you evolve as an attorney to keep your job?
So there's certain types of law that I think are always going to be necessary.
For
sure. Exactly. Our system is not going to allow robots to give legal advice to people when it comes to matters of life and death and freedom. But let's say, for example, there's a contract. You're a businessman and it's handed to you and you want someone to analyze it. Well, you can pay a human being $500 an hour.
I just did.
Or what you could do is scan it and run it through an AI program that could give you the same
for
level
$20 a month.
There you go.
Wow.
And you've already seen that, like, for example, LegalZoom, which has been out for a number of years now, which provided documents to people that you used to have to get from lawyers. Well, the next step is going to be analysis. And it's faster, it's more reliable, and it's cheaper. Yeah. So there's
definitely faster because y'all take forever.
There you go.
It's like just to get to you, it's like the paralegals and the secretaries and all these people.
Exactly.
And then it's like, oh yeah, he has an appointment 3 weeks from now.
Right. And then drafting documents, for example.
Takes forever.
That's going to change. I mean, AI is going to change many things.
You know who this is going to help? Us moms trying to find y'all niggas are not paying child support. What? I'm going to add it all up. Find him at this address. I need a motion. To get him arrested today.
Right.
And it's going to come back with, this is what you have to do. And might file it for you too.
There you go. And I think it's going to empower individuals, which really the legal system should. I mean, for far too long, the legal system basically said, hey, look, there's this mysterious field out there. And the only way that you can navigate it is with us. And to be honest, generally, that wasn't the case. There's a lot of fluff that we put in for one reason, and it's money. And to a certain extent, the profession became predatory. But now AI.
Those business attorneys are going to hate you.
Well,
you should have done criminal. You should have been out here saving the people.
Exactly. So you're going to see that's going to change dramatically.
Wow. And your trial too. So they're not going to bring a robot to trial.
There you go. Exactly.
Well, from your background, they're probably like, one, I forgot how like soothing your voice is every time I'm like, I'll just be interested. Just tell me more stories.
Right.
But you, from what I remember, you did something with, you were a federal attorney.
That's right. So the first thing I did, first thing I started off, you ever see the movie A Few Good Men?
I've heard of it.
All right. So classic movie. Have to check it out this weekend, but I'm sure many of your viewers have seen it. Tom Cruise. I know you've seen the meme with Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth. Jack Nicholson's the Marine officer.
I know Jack. Yeah. I know his name. I don't know.
See, I'm dating myself now. Your audience probably has no idea. That's a classic movie, folks.
They do. We're older too.
You can find it on Turner Classic Movies if that channel's still around. But my first job, I was a lawyer in the Army.
Yes,
that's
you
right.
were in the Army.
That's right. Yeah. So I did criminal defense work and prosecution in the Army.
Okay.
And then after I got out.
What kind of stuff do you prosecute there? Somebody cheating?
So, here's the interesting thing. In the Army, I did cases all the way from minor offenses, like someone not showing up for work on time or being disrespectful to an officer, to murder.
Who they killed?
Oh, gosh.
Each other?
Kill each other, kill people off base. The worst murder case that I had in the Army, it was a case of a soldier who raped and killed his roommate's girlfriend, and then conspired with the roommate to dispose of the body. It was a capital murder case. I was the defense attorney because I was a lawyer for people in the Army. So it's like being a public defender in the Army. It was, you don't pick your cases, they get it. That's right. They get assigned to you.
And he killed her.
So he was convicted. He was presumed innocent, and I did the best that I could. There was some terrible evidence. But so we did all types. A lot of child pornography cases in the military, a lot of sexual assault, computer crimes. Anything you see in civilian society would take place in military installations.
And they have to live on the base or just be active?
So you just have to be on active duty. So it has to be an offense that took place while you're on active duty, and usually on military installations.
So wait, so they don't have to pay for a lawyer?
So they don't. It's
what?
Listen, the military has perhaps the most progressive set of rules and benefits, things you get when you're in the military. Basically free healthcare, basically free dental care, basically free housing, and free lawyers.
I'm actually so glad that you're going to do that you said all that, because what I really wanted to talk to you about today was politics.
Yes.
And really the elections that are coming up. So this is really going to be a kind of a time sensitive part of the interview. And maybe if you're listening a year from now, fast forward to when we get to the letters, or unless you want to listen to this. But the thing is that healthcare, lawyers, everything in this country costs so much money, and it's so
Exactly.
hard to get to.
Mhm.
And right now we're in the middle of an election.
Right.
That seems to me like it's going to be a very important election. And I don't know if I think I'm getting old because when I was 18
Mhm.
and Obama was running,
Wow.
that's
You're
for his
18.
first time.
Right.
It was him and McCain.
That's correct.
I just remember everyone saying it's such an important election.
Mhm.
And I guess they all are in a sense.
Right.
But this feels like it'll make a difference.
It will. It will. It will definitely. And let me tell you why I think personally it's going to make a difference here. And you have to look at the United States Supreme Court. Okay. Right now, the United States Supreme Court has a definite conservative majority. If you look at the justices on the Supreme Court, the liberals, you really have three. You have Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was appointed.
Just got appointed.
By President Biden. You have Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who was appointed by Barack Obama. And then you have Justice Elena Kagan. They are considered to be the three sort of liberal, progressive.
There's 3 women.
Well, there are 4 women on the court, but there are 3 women who are part of the
3.
progressive wing. You're correct.
And then how many on the other side?
So on the other side, what you have is you have Justice Neil Gorsuch, who's a definitely Republican conservative. Justice Clarence Thomas, who's
That's the
conservative.
black one. That's the
black
Uncle
one.
Tom.
That's right.
Mhm. I know about him.
Exactly. You've got Justice, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who is definitely a conservative, who, interestingly enough, played a significant role in elections. And let me tell you just briefly about John Roberts and why elections are so important.
Okay.
He is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. John Roberts, right, was an unknown man before he got appointed to the Supreme Court. Now, you were 18 when Obama was elected, when he was going through the election. So you were probably too young to remember all the drama that took place here in Florida in 2000.
What happened?
So in 2000, we had the presidential election. It was between then Vice President Al Gore and George W. Bush. Okay.
Yeah. I remember the
Right.
names and being a thing, but I don't remember what the problem was.
Exactly. So here's the problem. It came down to really about 535 votes. Who actually won? That was an issue. You had election day in 2000.
535?
That's right. You actually had the election, and the morning of the election, right? People were saying, okay, we'll know tonight who's going to win. The next day, the news network said, we really can't tell you because there's some uncertainty over the vote in Florida. Well, the issue is this. Down in Broward County, you had something called a butterfly ballot. It was a uniquely shaped and designed ballot, which some people viewed as confusing. And so therefore, some people went in and really legitimately said, hey, I thought I was voting for this person, but because of the way the columns were set up, I ended up voting for someone else. And then you also had an issue of
And
ballots.
that's the only county that had those?
Well, Broward County was the main one that had the problem, the most significant county. You also had issues of voting machines not punching all the way through. And so you couldn't tell if a person actually determined that they wanted to vote for that person or not, because normally the voting machines at the time, what it would do is you push it in and it would punch a hole through. And so you had this famous thing called hanging chads. Okay. Now people wonder, what is a hanging chad? So just imagine a piece of paper. When you punch through the hole, that thing that's left hanging on is called a chad.
Okay.
Well, for a ballot, you want there to be no chad. The hole needs to go all the way through. Okay. But what ended up happening is that you had hanging chad. So there were disputes over, did I pencil in the right column? This piece of paper, can we tell the intent of the voter? The bottom line is we didn't have a determination about who was actually the president for almost 2 months. And you had legal challenges that went through the state courts in Florida and the federal courts. It was a really big thing. So at the time, there was a young Republican lawyer named Ted Cruz, who's currently a senator.
Yes.
And Ted Cruz.
Isn't he Hispanic and he wanted to be little Trump?
That's right. That's right. So Ted Cruz was working with the legal team for George W. Bush's campaign to try to resolve the issue of who won Florida, because the election was hanging in the balance. Who won Florida? So Ted Cruz said, look, there's a guy I know who's a brilliant writer. We need to get in contact with him. We need to have him do the research and write the briefs. If we get this guy, I guarantee you we're going to win. So the Bush campaign said, all right, fly him down here to Florida, put him up in a ritzy hotel room, give him room service, give him whatever he wants so he can write these briefs.
And the brief is supposed to do what?
What the brief is, it's the document that's presented to the courts that summarizes the argument you're making about why you should win.
Okay.
And remember, this went to the United States Supreme Court. This was a really significant...
To find out who the president was.
That's correct. Ultimately, Bush won because The Florida Supreme Court said, hey, we need to do a recount, right? We need to do a recount because there's an issue.
That's the smartest thing to do.
And honestly, the Florida Supreme Court knew one thing, and this is important to remember. Back at that time, the governor of Florida was George Bush's brother, Jeb Bush.
I do remember him.
And the Secretary of State, Kathleen Harris, was a Republican. So there was a lot of concern about whether or not they actually kind of nudged some things along for George W. Bush. So the Florida Supreme Court said, hey, we're going to do this recount because we think that things have not been counted properly.
2 months later.
Supreme Court steps in and says, stop the recount. Stop it. We're not going to allow it. Give the presidency to George W. Bush. Okay.
But why? How?
And to this day, legal professionals are still trying to figure out what the rationale was for it. It was such a bad opinion that even the Supreme Court itself said, do not rely upon this opinion, okay? Because it's just very uniquely tailored to this set of facts. There's a bunch of legal gobbledygook in it. I'll actually send it to you so you can read it. But bottom line is he got the hookup. W got the hookup, right?
That's how you got
from the Supreme Court at
and
the time.
And it was a second term?
So this was actually for his first term. This was when he was running.
Wow.
That's right. That's right. Both he and Al Gore were running to be president. Right. So back to this young lawyer, the one who was conservative, who was the brilliant writer. Bush sent him a card and he said, thank you so much. I appreciate everything you've done. And I promise you'll be taken care of. About a year later, he appoints that young lawyer to a federal judgeship, then elevates him to an appeals court position, and then eventually nominates him to the Supreme Court.
Within those first 4 years?
That's right. That lawyer, Justice John Roberts, the current Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So he's been there
for a minute because that's a lifetime position.
Lifetime tenure. So that was the hookup, And so,
I mean, I want somebody to hook me up too. What can I get hooked up with? Which one of my friends got power?
Exactly.
Who want to be president?
Exactly.
Kamala.
Yeah.
She got me.
There you go.
Student loans, Kamala. Hello.
There you go.
77,000.
That's right.
Wipe them off. That's all I want.
And so, the other justices is Brett Kavanaugh. You remember him. That was the guy.
He was an asshole.
Exactly.
He was the rape guy, right?
That's right. The rape guy.
guy.
That's right. There's Samuel Alito. And
Don't know him.
So he's been in the news recently. Samuel Alito, after Trump lost the election.
You're so smart.
Oh, no.
Like, who
know. I'm just a nerd.
I feel like you're AI yourself. AI can't replace you. Okay.
After the election, Alito, who is a justice on the Supreme Court, flew outside of his house an upside down flag. It is the worst thing to do if you're an American. It's a symbol of distress. Okay. In other words, when you fly a flag upside down, it's a code phrase that's used to say either the United States is under attack or we're in distress. It's also a symbol of disrespect. In other words, he just did that. So when Trump lost, right? Remember, Trump lost in 2020 and then contested the election from 2020 all the way to 2021. Alito's wife flew the flag upside down. There's an undercover group of liberals and they go to conservative meetings and they pretend to be conservatives and they record people. And they don't
know who it is.
Exactly. And they recorded Alito's wife. And she made a bunch of homophobic statements, very negative statements about people who weren't Trump supporters, and admitted basically that she was the one flying the flag upside down. And then there's Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who's the other woman who's on the conservative wing. So you've got Alito, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Clarence Thomas, and John Roberts.
So it's 8 total.
That's right. Well, you got 9 total. You have 9 on the Supreme Court altogether. And Gorsuch. So you've got a 6-3. 6 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 9 on the Supreme Court.
So why can't we just add 3 more?
In which we can. The Constitution actually allows the Congress to authorize an increase in the court, and it can be done. But for reasons of sort of norms and not upsetting the other party, no president has ever done it. Now, there was a president who proposed it, and that was FDR. FDR, back during the Depression era, when he was trying to pass a number of programs that kept getting struck down.
That's Roosevelt, right?
That's right. Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt. So he said, you know what? Guess what? I have a solution to this. We need to add more justices to the Supreme Court. Okay.
And what happened?
Republicans were like, oh, it's terrible. It's packing the court. This is unfair. And there are a lot of reasonable things that could be done, but simply aren't done because people adhere to what they call norms or traditions, things of that nature. But
they talk about tradition with one thing, but not others.
Exactly. And to circle back, like your question was, why is this such an important election? For me, it's really 3 things. The first is the Supreme Court. It's in the balance. Clarence Thomas, you mentioned him, and he definitely has some issues. But
how old is he? Is he gonna kick
Clarence
rocks yet?
Thomas, I believe that he's in his 70s.
Because he's been around for a long time.
He has been around for a long time. But here's what's interesting about Clarence Thomas. True documented story. None of this is spin. Everything I'm about to tell you about him, definite facts. About 16 years ago, Clarence, who makes about $285,000, I think, is a salary for a Supreme Court justice right now.
That's it?
Yeah, said, you know what? I'm not making enough money. Now, you would expect perhaps him to make more, but that's a salary I think most Americans would love to have.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't know. I
100%.
thought maybe the position is so big it might have had more money.
Well, exactly. It's still a federal government salary, though. So that's the thing.
Makes sense.
So what he did is he started telling his conservative friends, hey, look, I could step out tomorrow and make millions. So I'm going to leave. Now, there's an organization called the Federalist Society. It's a nonprofit group that promotes conservative legal causes. It lobbies for conservatives to get judicial appointments, for the passage of conservative laws, things of that nature. Clarence talked to a guy named Leonard Leo, who is the head of the Federalist Society. And he said, look, I'm going to leave. Leonard goes, no, please don't step down because we need you. You are a reliable conservative vote on the court.
You are the one black man we want to see talk about.
Exactly,
like the white people. Okay.
exactly. So what ended up happening is Leonard Leo brokered a meeting between Clarence Thomas and a guy named Harlan Crow. Harlan Crow is a billionaire. I mean, like billionaire. Not just a guy who has like 1 billion. I'm talking about like 10, 15, 20 billions worth of dollars. After this meeting, suddenly, hey, Clarence, you always said you wanted a recreational vehicle? Here you go. Harlan Crow got him an RV. Harlan Crow started paying for the tuition for a nephew that he was caring for like a son. Harlan Crow took care of various other bills. Harlan Crow then started flying him on luxury trips 2 to 3 times a year. 2 to 3 times a year.
He was his sugar daddy.
There you go. There's a group called ProPublica that does a lot of good journalism. And what they determined is that from the time that Harlan Crow met Clarence Thomas to now, Harlan Crow has personally given, in terms of trips, bills paid, and various other items, almost triple the amount of money to Clarence Thomas that Clarence Thomas has pulled in from his salary, like in tens of millions of dollars. So he effectively was bribing him to stay on the Supreme Court.
And what was he doing for it?
Well,
what's the strange things?
Here's
for
what's interesting. Exactly. Remember when COVID hit? Okay. In other words, to talk about these stories and to point these things out, you have to depend on catching the attention of people and saying, listen, stick with me for 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to tell you something. But news networks, they don't want that. Instead, what they want is the quick, flashy, gossipy stuff.
Right. Because
it's clicks. Now, there are news organizations out there that do help spread these types of news stories.
The Daily is a good podcast that I like. I like their journalism.
Exactly. But the problem is for sort of the average person who really doesn't pay a lot of attention to the news, when they do, what do? They'll go to CNN.com or they will rely upon, for example, the local newspaper. And the problem is a lot of the newspapers or these networks, you also have to look at who owns them. Okay. Like, for example, labor issues, right? Which is the second thing, affordability, right? Amazon is a great company if you're looking to get a pair of headphones tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It's also probably one of the most labor oppressive companies of all time in terms of trying to keep down pay and benefits.
Damn, my friend works there part-time.
They do a lot to provide convenience, mostly to people who have disposable income and who are well off. But the way that you can get a pair of AirPods tomorrow at 20% off is because the people who work for them are making kind of substandard wages. Let's be honest. They're basically a flashier form of Walmart. They really are, right? Well, go take a look for the past 4 years, the Washington Post, for example, which is still a very popular news.
Now you got to pay $1.
You got to pay $1, right? Try to find stories critical of Amazon. The reason you won't, because you know who purchased the Washington Post a few years ago?
Jeff Bezos?
Jeff Bezos.
Huh.
And you just go look on and on and on. A lot of these entities.
These billionaires will buy out the media.
A lot of these news entities.
And then leave the same people working, but
That's
they're just
right.
not allowed to talk about them.
That's right.
So does that happen with Big Pharma too?
100%. 100%. There is a guy. His name is Billy Towson. Okay. He was a member first of the Democratic Party. He's a member of the House of Representatives. You've probably heard of him. He was first a Democrat.
Okay.
And then he eventually switched to the Republican Party. But when he was in Congress, he was on a couple of committees that dealt with the regulation of the pharmaceutical industry. Okay.
Oh.
So what started happening is that the people who would work for him for a couple of years would then leave and then go get jobs with pharmaceutical companies. Billy Towson wrote one of the biggest bills that was ever signed into law with regard to regulation, basically effectively the deregulation of the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute that that was signed into law, he then left and took a job as the chief pharmacy lobbyist in Washington, D.C., more than quadrupling his salary. And that is why many of the issues that we have today, like, for example, there's still issues concerning pricing, right? Why the government can't negotiate for prices and so forth.
Of medications.
Exactly. Things of that nature. And why is it? It's because there's a revolving door. Corporations and businesses know how important government is. I had a conversation with someone the other day and he said, I don't do politics. I said, okay, you may not do it, but it's going to do you. Okay. Because if you don't pay attention to it, trust me, it's going to do something to you.
I like that right there. So
yeah.
I don't do politics, but politics is going to do you. No Vaseline.
100%.
It's going to do you.
Yeah. And you hit on something, which is affordability, right?
Yes.
I think the primary crisis right now we're facing in America is this, and this cuts across all lines. It's just too difficult to afford the hallmarks of the American dream. Home, a reliable car, health insurance, education. Food.
Even to get good food in certain neighborhoods, like you literally don't have a Publix or a Walmart or nothing. You have little corner stores that can't keep the food, fresh food there. So it's just BS all the time.
Gasoline, just so many things. And this is not a result of just natural economic forces. It's a result of deliberate governmental decisions that have been made. Like, for example, most other countries, at some point, they say, look, we're going to control this. Corporations are not just going to let you do whatever you want to do. We'll have price controls. You say price controls in the United States, oh, you're a communist. You're terrible. Well, there actually are price controls.
But if we're able to do it for the people in the Army, and we're able to do all of this for veterans,
absolutely,
then why can't we do it for the rest of the country?
The reason it's not happening is because I think of the third thing and why this election is important. And it's because of this. We need to retake politicians from both parties and remove them from where they are now, which is that they're a captive of the donor class. Okay. I saw this firsthand back around 2016. I was in DC for a couple of events, and you'll see elected officials who, if you walked up to them right now and said, hi, my name's Carla and you represent me in Congress, someone would look at you and go, okay, yeah, whatever. But if you said, hey, I'm Harlan Crow, they suddenly know that Harlan Crow's a billionaire. Oh, Mr. Crow, what do you need? I'll take care of you. I'll do whatever you want.
And who's saying this to him?
So Harlan Crow goes up to a member of Congress and
just
says,
a random
member. Person says, I'm Harlan Crow. They're suddenly going to say, Mr. Crow, how are you? Let's invite you for lunch. Let's invite you for dinner.
With nothing else said.
Because he has money.
I need to get
He has the money.
Okay,
exactly.
We're trying to get rid of the Harlan Crows.
We're trying to get rid of the influence that they have over politics. Because if you ever wonder, why is it that so many middle class concerns, right? Affordability of housing, affordability of healthcare, why aren't those concerns being taken care of? And that's because our government basically is saying, well, hey, middle class and working class people, you don't vote. Do you know who has the highest levels of voter participation in America?
The rich people.
Billionaires, millionaires.
But how many are there really compared to us? Right.
Well, we obviously are much more in terms of the voting population. But let me give you an example of why they don't pay attention to us. We just had a primary a few weeks ago here in Orange County for some important positions, state attorney, school board, things of that nature. Of the number of people who are eligible to vote, okay? So just that's 100%. That's the universe of people who could vote. Guess what the percentage was of people who actually voted in the primary?
In Florida.
Here in Orange County.
Oh, here in Orange County. Okay, Orange County. 60.
17%. 17%. Yeah, that's it.
Can I tell you something? Can I confess something?
Mhm.
I was actually here
Mhm.
recording
Mhm.
that day. And I'm like, I'm going to go straight to my place. And I drove right past it and totally forgot until after 7:00.
And so here's the thing.
And it was Board of Education was there.
so many things.
And I'm like,
so many
my
things.
kid is about to be in school in 2026. I needed to vote. And I should have just gotten a ballot and done a mail-in ballot.
It's basic human and organizational dynamics. Organizations respond to people who are actually engaged. 3 dirty little secrets that politicians don't say publicly, but they say privately. Number 1, they know most people don't pay attention. And this is not designed to embarrass anyone in any way, but for those who are listening, ask yourself this question. Do you know who represents you in the state legislature? Who is your state House member or state Senate member? Most people don't. Do you know who is your state Secretary of State?
Do you know our Secretary of State? Okay, me neither.
Most politicians on the state level, they know that. And so they know the major goal is just to get in. The real true brass ring is to be elected to state office. If you can get in and really not piss off anyone wealthy, you can stay in forever unless you're in a place that has term limits.
I have an idea.
Mhm.
I feel like our legislators
Mhm.
and the people that represent us should be TikTokers. They should do TikTok. So they need to have better marketing people in their team. I'm dead ass.
But they don't want that though. But here's the thing.
Why?
The reason they don't want it is because democracy dies in the dark and they like the darkness. Because democracy, what is it about? Right now, we have a system that's really not democratic. In a democratic system, who's more important, the voter or the elected official? It's the voter. In a democratic system, politicians don't see it as a job. They see it as what? Public service. In a democratic system, they're responsive to the needs of the people, right? So forgive me, I'm going to take this way, way back. It's important to understand just how anti-democratic the United States was when it was founded. When you go vote in November, you're going to be able to vote for your member of Congress and your U.S. senator who's up for election at the time. That wasn't how it was when the United States first started off. When the United States first started off, we had direct election of members of Congress, but members of the Senate were picked by the state legislature. Why? Because the founder said, the House is really for the lower class people. Let's let them have a voice. But for the 100 senators, we need to have the state legislatures pick, not directly the people. That's one way in which the country is anti-democratic. Now, that only changed as a result of an amendment to the Constitution, where we now have the direct election of senators. But people, unless they really understand the roots of American history, how we were actually created, they don't understand why there's this gap between what voters say they want and things that don't happen. Another example of an anti-democratic impulse is this. I'm sure at some point we'll talk about the 2 people who are running for the presidency, but one of them we would probably have never talked about again if we had direct election of the president. Okay, we don't. Hillary Clinton won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but she lost the presidency. Why? Because of the Electoral College. That was another anti-democratic impulse. The founders at the time said, how should we pick the president? Some people said, just count the number of votes. But then you had other people who said, no, we can't do that. You know who those people were? They were in the South. Southern states had a population advantage over the North, but that population advantage was as a result of the presence of slaves who were not people and couldn't vote. And so if you had direct election, right, the North was always going to prevail. And the Southerners were like, we can't do this because we certainly aren't going to give the vote to Black people.
Right.
And we can't do it by popular vote because the North will always have an advantage. So instead, we'll do the Electoral College. What we'll do is we will apportion electoral votes to the states so that even though there's a popular vote at the end of the day.
And who's the electoral vote? So
the Electoral College, the way it works is when you actually go and vote, you're voting for people who are members of a political party and who've sworn to, when they meet, to actually cast their electoral votes, right? So it's really, again, an example of anti-democratic impulses. Exactly. Remember at the Democratic Convention recently where they did the little DJ thing and they said, our state cast this number of electoral votes, or we give our delegates and so forth, right? That's an example of it. We really don't have individual direct democracy in the United States for the president. Okay. And this is something that's key to really think about. The Republican Party, right? Donald Trump was president. Yeah, George W. Bush, who was president for 2 terms. Something to note, again, another honest to goodness true fact. Since 1992,
Okay.
the Republican
That's Bill Clinton.
candidate, that's right, yeah, when he was running, since 1992, the Republican candidate for the presidency has never, ever gotten above 50% of the popular vote, with the exception of one time. And that was in 2004 with George Bush, and it was 50.1, just slightly over. Now, he served 2 terms, even though with his first term, he got fewer popular votes than Al Gore. So we've had presidents in this country, Bush, W, and Donald Trump, who lost effectively. In other words, in any other realm, imagine, for example, last night, Chiefs ended up beating Ravens, right? 27-20. But let's say if they said, well, you know what? That's the score. But we kind of think that the Ravens did a little bit of a better job. So we're going to take their yards gained and we're going to give the game to them. People would say, what in the hell is this? Right?
So that's what they're doing.
That's what happens with the presidential vote. And so even though.
So then that goes to the question that a lot of our people ask, does our vote even matter? It
does matter. And let me tell you why voting matters, why it matters significantly. Voting matters because what I always tell people to do is think about those who really have power, what they don't want you to do, what they don't want you involved in. That's the stuff that you need to be doing. So for example, the books they don't want you to read those books, right? The meetings that they don't want you to go to, those are the meetings that you should go to. The things they don't want you to pay attention to, you should pay attention to those things because that's where important decisions are being made.
But it's still not answering if we all go out there, they can still win on the electoral college vote.
And this is why I say it's important to vote, though, because what's going to start happening, right, is we're going to start getting people into office who are going to start asking questions and then saying, well, why do we have the electoral college now, right? My prediction is that 20 years from now, the electoral college will be abolished. And I'll tell you why. Let me show you how perverse it can be. Again, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump did. But the reason that he became president is because of this electoral college anomaly. Now, why is it bad? The reason it's bad is because if you live in certain states, the presidential candidates really don't care. They don't go there. Give me an example, California. California, probably the most important state in the United States. Big state, very vibrant, a lot of economic influence, not just in this country, in the world. California, I dare you to find presidential candidates who actually go there for any reason other than to meet with people in Hollywood and get a bunch of money. The reason they don't go is because California is reliably a Democratic state. On the other hand, take for example.
So Kamala won't go to California?
She'll go to meet people in Hollywood, but she's not going to be campaigning. There are only 5 states.
So these campaigns that they're doing that are on the news, California is not one of them?
There's only going to be 5 states that they'll visit, right? Because they already know. There are only 5 states that are really in play. Since 1992.
But they come here.
Florida's a swing state. Florida's a swing state. Here are the states that they really focus in on. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, and North Carolina. Okay.
What about Texas?
Oh, no. Texas is reliably Republican. It's deep, dark red. Deep, dark red. The reason that we need to change the electoral college is because, let's say, for example, if you live in Mississippi, which is, I think, the poorest state in the United States, right? Neither presidential candidate goes there. I mean, I doubt if Trump or Kamala Harris will visit Mississippi. Why? Because they say, oh, you know what? It's a red state, Republican state. There's no need to go there. The reason we have to change the electoral college is because what ends up happening is the presidential candidates only go to those states just to win. Just to win.
But again, if that electoral vote is not going to change for another 20 years, November of 2024, how will us going out to vote change it?
Well, let me give you an example and make things local, because I will say one thing today. If you remember nothing else, the most important elections that you're going to vote in November are your local elections. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that.
And that's the same day you go vote for the president?
Same day. Okay. Exactly. I saw lives for 20 years ruined by one thing: people who wanted to smoke marijuana. Okay. Nowadays, for the most part, the greatest example of how marijuana is accepted, you're too young to remember this, but back when I was in my 20s, okay, public enemy number 1 in the United States was Snoop Dogg. Okay. Remember that famous picture where he's sitting there like this at the defendant's table because he just beat the murder rap? I mean, the FBI was investigating him. You had presidential candidates saying that he was a menace to society.
Okay.
Just a couple months ago, he's representing the United States in the Olympics.
Literally.
Right.
He was out there just Snoop Doggy Dogg.
There you go. There you go. And it shows you how quickly things can change. You can go from being a murder suspect and a menace literally to being America's representative on the biggest athletic stage. Well, how does that happen? It happens because of voting and changing attitudes and so forth. And I would say that Snoop Dogg, in addition to good work with his PR people, when states like Colorado, Oregon, and others started saying, you know what, we're going to decriminalize or make marijuana legal, well, attitudes started to change. In Florida, in November, we're going to have that on the ballot.
Listen. I think I'm going to do an early voting just in case something happens. I need to cast my vote.
Right.
Because I need to be, my license just expired 15 days ago and I am upset that I haven't renewed it yet.
Right.
Because my friend said, oh, I'm going to go and I was going to go with her and I couldn't go pick up my weed. And I have a partnership. It's free.
And let me tell you why it's so important, not just for smoking weed, but I'll just explain why I think it really impacts life more than people realize. Right now, a lot of police officers harass people because of marijuana. Yeah. Oh, I smell marijuana in your car. And they use that as a pretext to do other things. But it's also a multi-trillion-dollar business. Okay. The former Speaker of the House, conservative Republican, John Boehner, who for years was like, we've got to, war against drugs, say no to drugs, say no to marijuana. When he left the House, you know what he became involved in? Marijuana.
Isn't Morgan & Morgan? Don't they own some dispensaries?
They are all getting in this. Look, they know what time it is. They've seen it coming for quite some time. And so ironically, sadly, the very thing that was used to oppress and harm and really destroy a lot of families, primarily minority, now suddenly it's going to become legal. Guess who's going to benefit from it? So that's why I say it's important to vote, because when you go and vote, what are you going to do? You're going to open up economic opportunities. But let me give you another example. I mean, you talked about legal woes and encountering things. Most people have no idea that the most impactful public figure and politician is on the ballot in November. I would say even more so than the president. You know who that person is? The district attorney. District attorneys, state attorney.
Isn't that the young lady, Ayana? Yes. That was the whole thing. They took her down.
So Monique Worrell is the state attorney who was removed by DeSantis. Now, before her, there was Aramis Ayala.
Yes.
In Aramis Ayala, what they did with her is they took away her right to handle death penalty cases. And she said, okay, then I'm not going to run for re-election. Then when it was time for the election, Monique Worrell ran. Liberal, progressive, African-American woman, and she won. And what happened? Governor DeSantis, when he decided he was going to run for the presidency, he came up with a plan to get rid of her. And so he suspended her in Florida.
But how? What did she do?
So he made up things. Now, in Florida, exactly. In Florida, the governor has the authority to remove public officials for reasons of incapacity. You have a brain injury, something happened to you, you can't do your job. You commit a crime, a felony. Hey, you just got busted for rape. You obviously can't be the state attorney, so I'm going to remove you. Or serious dereliction of duty. So what he did, dereliction of duty. In other words, you're not doing your job. So
who determines that?
Exactly. It's very subjective. So what he did is they started planning this about 2 or 3 months before they did it. He said, listen, I want to run for office. I want to beat Trump. And the way that I need to do that is by showing that I'm tough on crime. Monique Worrell says that she's a liberal, woke, progressive prosecutor. It's going to be good for me and my image to get rid of her. And there's literally documented emails and text showing this. So what they did is they started meeting with local law enforcement and said, give us anything that you have on her. They were following her. They were trying to find if there was a personal scandal. They couldn't find anything. But there were a couple of cases that perhaps didn't go the way you might want them to go. Ideally, it had nothing to do with her. And so therefore, and now let's be clear, the police unions locally wanted to get rid of her because she started bringing cases against cops for misconduct. So there was a press conference one day, and this is what happened to her. Literally, DeSantis comes out and he's reading a document saying that he's removing her from duty, removing her from being the state attorney.
And she has no idea.
She's on her way into the office and tries to open the door, and there are security guards standing there telling her, You need to check the news. The governor's removed you. All of your credentials are gone. The only thing that we need you to do is to give us a forwarding address where we can turn everything, turn in your access card and everything. Exactly. And then they ushered some of her senior leadership out of the office. They had been meeting and planning this. Imagine if you were to go home tonight and when you show up, there's another family in your house and you're like, what is this?
I mean, this is kind of what happened to me 2 years ago.
And that's
when it was like the letter came in and said, your rights are gone. Out of nowhere. Like, I was literally just sitting there watching a movie, eating popcorn.
That's what they did. They got rid of her. Now, here's the trick that they pulled, and this is incredibly important when you talk about why voting matters, why it's important. Understand there are forces that want people to not vote. But what I'm about to tell you now is true story. I'll provide no editorializing. So she gets removed, and what they do is they replace her. Now, they knew they couldn't replace her with the person they wanted to put in, who was a white male. Mm-hmm. So instead, they found a black male.
What's his name?
His name's Andrew Bain. Okay. He's the current state attorney. He was a judge.
I want Andrew Gillum.
No.
He would have had a good time. Just kidding. Right. Yeah, their native land with my other client,
there
Tiffany.
You go.
Shout out to the Native Land Pod.
Yeah, good podcast.
I really wanted you to be the governor.
Yeah.
You would have been fun.
He would have been great. So they put Andrew Bain in.
Okay.
And basically tell him, hey, look, just be a steward for this office. So he takes over as the state attorney. Now, Monique is out. She files a lawsuit to get her office back.
Right.
But then says, I'm also going to run again. Now, Bain is a Republican.
Okay.
The election for state attorney is taking place this year. What he did is he registered for re-election as an independent. And here's why he did it.
When people don't know who to vote for, they go independent?
Exactly.
I do that.
You can't win as a Republican state attorney in Orange and Osceola County. Orange and Osceola County is a Democratic stronghold. For local races, the Democrats win. And for national, this is a very liberal area. You have a lot of young people, a lot of people from other places, Hispanics, blacks, gays, and lesbians. Very pro-Democratic area. So
Orange and Seminole.
Orange and Osceola.
Orange and Osceola.
Yeah. The concern is that Bain wouldn't win if he had the R next to his name. So what they did is they said, Bain, you run as an independent with an I. They recruited a local lawyer named Seth Hyman to run in the Republican primary. Now, a couple things to know about Seth Hyman. Seth Hyman was fired from the state attorney's office because of allegations that he withheld evidence from criminal defendants. He's fired as a prosecutor. But the Republican Party, okay, recruited him to run as the Republican nominee for the state attorney's office.
What?
He ran. He had an opponent, a guy named Thomas Fider, who was a moderate Republican, who said, look, what are we doing, Republican Party? Why are we nominating a man with this history? I have no blemishes on my record. I'm a good lawyer. I'm a Republican. I have experience as a prosecutor. I worked in that office. I should be the one. Seth Hyman won. Okay. So after he wins the nomination, he waits 2 weeks and then announces that he's withdrawing because his heart is no longer in it and he doesn't have the money or resources. The Republican Party then in Florida announces they will not find a substitute nominee. So now there's no Republican nominee.
So only independent.
There's only the independent and Democrat. And here's their calculation. Voters will go and see a black man and a black woman and say, you know what, whatever. And that it will make it more competitive for Bain. Now, these are the tricks and games that the Republican Party is playing with the state attorney's office. It's great marketing, but think about this. There's no other official in your county who has the ability to sign a document that could result in you or a loved one going to jail, getting the death penalty. Even something as simple as, let's say you get stopped for a traffic ticket and they decide to make it a criminal case. They're incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. Most people don't think about this. And I would say to your listeners, wherever you are, look to see if there is a prosecutor up for re-election in your jurisdiction. If so, you want to know, do they have any scandals? What's their prosecutorial philosophy, right? How do they hire? Who's there in the office, right? These are important elections. Folks, your local elections determine what your children are being taught, what fees you pay, even something as simple as how expensive is parking downtown. You live in Orlando, you think downtown's a mess with various issues or whatever. Well, hey, When's the last time you went to a city council meeting or a county commission meeting? You think there's drama with the roads?
And us showing up really would make a difference.
And I'll tell you why it makes a difference. The reason it makes a difference is because the people who actually do show up, you start to see, if you go and you start to express yourself and you get involved, you can make change. And I'll tell you why. My parents, right, who are still healthy and vibrant in their mid-70s, 80s, they were born to an America where they didn't have the right to vote. There was segregation and violence against them. But what changed that? Black people started to vote. And as a result of that, that voting made a change. Right now, women, for example, regardless of what your political position is, I think women would agree that there's something wrong with the fact that we're the only modern industrialized nation that's never had a woman as the chief executive.
Every other one has.
England, Spain, France, Germany, Philippines. You want to see something that's really sad? Google women presidents around the world, and you'll see all of these nations that have had women as leaders, not just in industrialized nations in Europe and Asia.
I mean, all the issues you just ran to me from the 50 minutes we've been talking have all been men.
Bingo.
So clearly we haven't tried anything different, and we need to try something different. And then you just mentioned prosecutors, and babe, I did it too. Can I do a two-part of this? I'm not doing the virtual one. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I want to do here is like go into that, because like this whole part, it's like a great foundation to go into like what the hell is going to happen now. Yeah. And I know that you mentioned the prosecutors, and that's one of the biggest thing that our media and Black media loves to focus on. Even Hispanic media loves to focus on her being a prosecutor. Right. So now that we're going into, I've never looked it up. So I guess in the video Court, I want you to add, let's Google, just like you said, women presidents, and I want to visually see what comes up, versus we've never had one. I mean, we had the VP, we had one run and lose, and we know that the majority now of the country voted for her. We just did whatever we did to keep Trump in. Those are two big things for me. It's like, why haven't we had a woman? And I truly believe a woman could do it, but is this the woman?
Right. So let me give you an example of why I would say she is the woman, and it's for this reason. Okay.
Hold that thought, and we'll come back for another episode.
Gotcha.
We'll cut here, and then I want to start there because that's a good segue to it.
Let me start the timer.
Wait, let me think of something. I didn't even do Florida Man. Fuck it. These two episodes are just out of whatever we're doing.
I just Googled it. Like 58 women.
Are you serious?
58.
Yeah.
It's all. Maybe we need to. I told you I want to start a podcast with you because it's easier. I just want to come in dumb. Just ask dumb questions and break them down, because we just don't know this stuff. And it's like, and they gave it to us in your terms, legal terms, or legal mumbo jumbo and big words. And I'm like, this is so boring.
Well, you know what it is? It's civics education. We don't do a good job of it in the United States. Because, remember, I grew up over in Germany. So for me, I have kind of like a different tradition of learning. And this was really something that they would hammer home all the time. But, think back to, I don't even think they really teach civics anymore. There's U.S. history that people probably take, and that's it. But in terms of taking classes about how government works, and no.
I just teach it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to, it's cut or it's one long one?
I'm still rolling.
Okay, cool. You can keep it. Okay, cool. You can keep it rolling. I'm going to kind of end it and then pick it back up with this one. Yeah. All right, we're going to stop right there, y'all. I'm going to keep Trey, but also attorney James Smith here with us, because I feel like that was a great foundation for us to really understand what our country is in terms that we can really understand them in a way that is spoken to us, where we're like, oh, is that what's really happening? And you have names. Use your Google the same way you look up Pornhub. And the same way you look up the Shade Room. Like, look up these names. I already told you guys weeks ago that my intention was to listen to more pods that had to do with politics. So I have done that. The Daily's been a great one. NPR has been great. Code Switch I've been listening to, just to try to get non-biased things about politics that are happening right now. So we'll come back next week and we'll really get into like Kamala and Trump and how it really affects us in our life before we get to this election. November what?
5th, November 5th. That's right, November 5th.
It's
That's
when
right.
we're going out. And I really want us all to get ballots beforehand and really understand the power of our vote in this country, even if it's to make a difference for our kids.
Mhm.
So we'll be back next week. And if you catch it this week, they can find you where?
You can find me on Trey's Table. It's a podcast that I actually have about African American history, politics, and culture.
Smart. See you next week.